Hello, this is Angelia, and you're listening to or watching the podcast Why You Do What You Do. The podcast talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more, excuse me, about, why you do what you do. I was actually sick yesterday, so bear with me, I might be coughing. The self and midlife issues and themes. Yeah, I look like I'm still in Bible reading, I guess. But yeah, that's what we were talking about last time, and that's where we're going to pick up this time. Oh my goodness. It's one of them lives. I'm a completely different person from now, from the one I was 20 years ago, said a 47-year-old architect, as 6 friends, all in their 40s and 50s, nodded vigorously in agreement. And of course, I'm a definitely different person than I was in my 20s, thank goodness. You know, hopefully if you're older, you are too. Many people feel and observe personality change occurring at midlife. Whether we look at middle-aged people objectively, in terms of their outward behavior, or subjectively, in terms of how they describe themselves, certain issues and themes emerge. Is there such a thing as a midlife crisis? How does identity develop in middle age? Do men and women change in different ways? What contributes to psychological well-being? All of these questions revolve around the self. So it's going to mean something different to everyone. Is there a midlife crisis? Changes in personality and lifestyle during the early to middle 40s are often attributed to the midlife crisis, a supposedly stressful period triggered by a review and reevaluation of one's life. The midlife crisis was conceptualized as a crisis of identity. Indeed, it has been called a second adolescence, because some folks, that's how they act, like they're kids again. What brings it on, said Elliot Jacques, the psychoanalyst who coined the term, is awareness of mortality. So we start to realize, yeah, we're on our downward slope. Many people now realize that they will not be able to fulfill the dreams of their youth, or that fulfillment of their dreams has not brought the satisfaction they expected. And, you know, that's just life. They know that if they want to change direction, they must act quickly, because the clock is ticking. Levinson maintained that midlife turmoil is inevitable as people struggle with the need to restructure their lives. However, the reality of the midlife crisis as a normative developmental experience is greatly in doubt today. Although the concept is somewhat fuzzy and hard to test, extensive research, including findings in Hong Kong as well as in Western industrialized countries, fails to support its universality. At least a source of psychological disturbance, in fact, its occurrence seems to be fairly unusual. So if you're in that area, don't be using that as an excuse to have a midlife crisis. The onset of middle age may be stressful, but no more so than some events of young adulthood. Apparently, midlife is just one of life's transitions, a transition typically involving an introspective review and reappraisal of values and priorities. This simultaneously the simultaneous managing of gains, y'all know my mouth, and losses, and recognition of the finitude of life, because you're not going to be around forever. Someday we're checking out. This midlife review can be a psychological turning point, a time of stock taking, yielding new insights into the self, and spurring mid-course corrections in the design and trajectory of one's life. It may bring regret over failure to achieve a dream, or keener awareness of the social clock the imminence of developmental deadlines, or time constraints on, say, the ability to have a child or find a new intimate partner. And here's some characteristics of ego-resilient adults. We're going to talk about the most characteristic and the most uncharacteristic. Has insight into their own motives and behavior. Uncharacteristic has a brittle ego defense, maladaptive under stress, is self-defeating. Characteristic has warmth, capacity for close relationships, has social poise and presence. Uncharacteristic is uncomfortable with uncertainty and complexities. Characteristic is productive, gets things done. Uncharacteristic overreacts to minor frustrations, is irritable. Characteristic is calm, relaxed in manner. Uncharacteristic is denies unpleasant thoughts and experiences. Characteristic is skilled in social techniques of imaginary play. Uncharacteristic is does not vary roles, releases to all in same way. Characteristic is socially perceptive of interpersonal cues. Uncharacteristic is basically anxious. Bleh. Characteristic is can see to the heart of important problems. Uncharacteristic is gives up and withdraws from frustration or adversity. Characteristic is genuinely dependable and responsible. Uncharacteristic is emotionally bland. Characteristic is responds to humor. Uncharacteristic is vulnerable to real or fancied threats. Fearful. Characteristic is values own independence and autonomy. Uncharacteristic is tends to ruminate and have preoccupying thoughts. Characteristic is tends to arouse liking and acceptance in initiatives and initiates humor. Okay, I'm back. That was my dad calling. We're going to the store for him tonight. Okay, now back to the characteristic and uncharacteristic. Characteristic tends to arouse liking and acceptance. Uncharacteristic feels cheated and victimized by life. Characteristic initiates humor. Uncharacteristic feels a lack of personal meaning in life. And if you fall on the side, you find yourself being uncharacteristic, then maybe it's time to go talk to somebody. You know, midlife can be hard to navigate. Maybe it's time to talk to somebody about what you really want. Whether a transition turns into a crisis may depend less on age than on individual circumstances and personal resources, because everybody's different, and everybody is more or less resilient than other folks. People with ego resiliency, the ability to adapt flexibly and resourcefully to potential sources of stress, are more likely to navigate the midlife crossing successfully. For people with resilient personalities, even negative events, such as an unwanted divorce, can become springboards for positive growth. And I know it was for me. You know, I found myself, my husband didn't even really want me working outside the home, but we weren't making enough, so I had started doing that. And then I ended up getting divorced. Here I was, a single mom with 3 kids, so I had to find a side hustle, you know, if you want to call it that. And I knew my best subject in school was psychology, but I was told I couldn't go to college and, you know, didn't really have the money to do all that. So I had started, and I was like, okay, I need to find things I can do. And so I found, you know, Coach Trading Alliance and became a life coach. And, you know, I'd gotten saved when I was 13, and I always kind of felt called, you know, to minister or something. So I looked into getting ordained, and I did that and started Works of Heart Women's Ministry Outreach and Education. Ran that for 17 years, which led to a charity that me and some friends started, which, you know, went for 9 years. I wish it went longer, but we helped like 188 people here in the community, so I guess we did some good. But I mean, it's never too late to look into helping yourself, improving yourself. My first life coaching client was my neighbor, and she was in her 70s. So, until you take your last breath, it's never too late. Identity development. Although Erickson defined identity formation as the main concern of adolescence, he noted that identity continues to develop, because it does. Indeed, some developmental scientists view the process of identity formation as the central issue of adulthood, because you got to figure out who you are, what you want, where you're going from any given point in time. Identity may consist not just of oneself, but of multiple possible selves, including the self a person hopes to become and the self a person is afraid of becoming. Like I said, I thank the Lord for all the people who I met that were not so good to me, because I figured out who I don't want to be in life. Turning points such as the midlife transition often involve changes in the way people see themselves. As Erickson observed, identity is closely tied to social roles and commitments. I am a mother, and if you are, you know that. I am a teacher, which I was. I am a citizen, which we all are. Because midlife is a time of stock taking with regard to roles and relationships. It may bring to the surface unresolved identity issues. And some people are like that. They went headlong into life and kept busy and busy and busy. And then they realize, oh crap, I'm past midlife and I didn't do anything I wanted to do. What do I do now? And like I said, if you come to that point, you might want to talk to somebody. Changing roles and relationships for men and women at this time may affect gender identity. Susan Krauss, Whitbourne, Identity is a Process. The identity process model of Susan Krauss, Whitbourne seeks to describe how identity changes, drawing on Erickson, Marcia, and Piaget. Whitbourne views identity as an organizing schema through which the individual's experiences are interpreted. Identity is made up of accumulated perceptions of the self, both conscious and unconscious. Perceived personality traits: I am sensitive, or I am stubborn. Physical characteristics and cognitive abilities are incorporated into the identity schema. These self-perceptions are continually confirmed or revised in response to incoming information, which can come from intimate relationships, work-related situations, community activities, and other experiences. People interpret their interactions with the environment by means of two ongoing processes, similar to those Piaget described for children's cognitive development: identity assimilation and identity accommodation. Identity assimilation is an attempt to fit new experience into an existing schema. Identity accommodation is adjustment of the schema to fit the new experience. Identity assimilation tends to maintain continuity of the self. Identity accommodation tends to bring about needed change. Most people use both processes to some extent. Madeleine Albright, when confronted with proof of her Jewish birth, accommodated to her identity schema to include her Jewishness, but also assimilated her new knowledge to her image of herself as the daughter of loving parents who had done their utmost to protect her. People often resist accommodation until events force them to recognize the need. The equilibrium a person customarily reaches between assimilation and accommodation determines his or her identity style. A person who uses assimilation more than accommodation has an assimilative identity style. A person who uses accommodation more has an accommodative identity style. Overuse of either assimilation or accommodation is unhealthy, says Whitbourne. People who constantly assimilate are inflexible and do not learn from experience. They see only what they are looking for. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people in the world like that. They may go to great lengths to avoid recognizing their inadequacies. People in the world like that too. People who constantly accommodate are weak, easily swayed, and highly vulnerable to criticism. Their identity is easily undermined. Most healthy is a balanced identity style, in which identity is flexible enough to change when warranted, but not unstructured to the point that every new experience causes the person to question fundamental assumptions about the self. Whitbourne, excuse me here, I don't know if it's a gnat or what, something, hair, I don't know. Whitbourne sees identity styles as related to Marsh's identity statuses. For example, a person who has achieved identity would be expected to have a balanced identity style, whereas a person in foreclosure would most likely have an assimilative style. According to Whitbourne, people deal with physical, mental, and emotional changes associated with their onset of aging, much as they deal with other experiences that challenge the identity schema. Assimilative people seek to maintain a youthful self-image at all costs. Accommodative people may see themselves, perhaps prematurely, as old and may become preoccupied with symptoms of aging and disease. People with a balanced style realistically recognize changes that are occurring and seek to control what can be controlled and accept what cannot. However, identity styles can shift in the face of highly unsettling events, such as a loss of long-time job to a younger person. That happened to my mom. Thus, a midlife crisis may be an extreme accommodative reaction to a set of experiences that no longer can be processed through identity assimilation. And that's where I'm going to leave you today. I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. That's all for now. Until next time.